Hi and welcome to our program. Today we have the artist and social entrepreneur Aske Kreilgaard here in the studio with us. Aske is going to tell us about his experiences while traveling around Europe. He's here in the refugee camp Calais and he's returned to Denmark. Hi Aske, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so let's get started. Maybe we can talk a little bit before your journey through Europe in 2015. Yes. How was your life back then?
Oh, so I was at that point living in a city called Herning in Denmark, and I had my own little house, and I was studying at the science school that at that time was called Tego. And I lived there. I had 2 jobs. Was very depressed. Ended up being not sick like physically, but like mentally sick. So I had to leave from the school for a while, and then in the end I just quit my jobs, quit my educations, and figured out I had to do something else. So I packed my things and started traveling. Yeah.
You were 22
Yes.
at the time, right?
Yeah.
And were you already producing art?
I started at that time. Okay. I started drawing a lot. I had a therapist at that time who saw me drawing a lot, and she actually advised me to start drawing a lot of my emotions out, to kind of find out what's happening, why I'm feeling so sad and stuff like that, right? And what is the struggle about? And I just did it 100% like everything I do. So I just bought a 10-meter long canvas and I just rolled it out in my living room and I started drawing and painting.
And was it natural? Like, did it come naturally? Did you have a previous background?
Very much. I think it was like a trance for me, but it was also very art therapy in some way or another. I think that's very powerful. I'm not sure it was art, but it was definitely art therapy. And if it comes naturally, I think so. And I don't have the big background, but I have family who is artistic as well. My granddad, who's now dead and has been dead for many years, he has built several sculptures in the city of Aarhus, actually.
Really?
His name was Uge3 Jespersen. And my mom is a textile designer, so there is some creativity, but yeah. Okay.
So was this depression that you mentioned your main motivation to want to leave Denmark?
Yeah, I was depressed, and for half a year I did nothing, and then drinking and drawing and not going anywhere, and had a very bad breakup with my girlfriend at that time, and just felt very sorry for myself, basically, right? And in these drawings I actually made the first one was a big forest when a naked blue boy inside would kind of like reached out, and I felt like he was kind of reaching out to me, and it kind of reminded me a lot of trouble I had as a youth. Because as a teenager, I got bullied a lot in school. Like for 4 years, nobody really spoke to me, and got people trying to beat me up, and got bullied a lot. And my family was breaking up. My mom and dad was breaking up. Had a bad relationship as well. Did that 3 times. Got together, got away, like that. So I felt I was very lonely at that time, and I actually tried suicide. So I was far out, and in the end, I didn't do it, obviously, and I just think at that time when I did this drawing, I kind of like reminded myself of the past. I kind of like figured out like, fuck man, I've been fighting my whole life and I've not been living, and I tried to live by the rules of others all the time, and there was no lies, there was no openness. Right, there was no openness to life. I was just keeping the masks on and trying to survive mentally. And I remember reading a book of Camus, the French philosopher, and he kind of says in the book that the most important question you can ask yourself is, do I want to live or do I want to die? And if you want to die, you should just kill yourself and get it over with.
That's a bit harsh.
Well, he is a bit harsh. And if you want to live, then you should at least live 100% authentic, right? And I had definitely not lived authentic. And so at that time, I had this little house with the design furniture and the right design clothes and all these things. And I just looked around, I remember, and just think, fuck all this. And I just gave it all away. And I figured out there must be something more to life. And I just started traveling, trying to find some love or whatever. Yeah.
Did you have a goal? Like, did you have a destination? Like, how was that?
Well, the goal was to have no goals, because I was so tired of having like, when you go through kindergarten, public school, high school, and then maybe university or whatever you go through, and then job, and on these levels of life, there's kind of like objectives and goals and grades, and I thought like, my whole life has been controlled by this. I just need to have no goals. So there was no goal. The goal was there was no goal. I had to have like life being able to surprise me in some way or another. Because if you have figured everything out, nothing can surprise you, right?
Yeah.
So I had to have something just jump out there, a leap of faith, you could say. However, my family didn't really like the idea. So my dad was really, you need to have some cities at least or whatever, and I tried to look that up, but there was no city I really liked. So instead I just at that time looked a lot on the internet, read a lot of The Guardian, English newspaper, and actually a lot of the newspaper had a city on the front page, and that was the French city in northern France called Calais, and it was not the city, but a city in the city called the Jungle, a refugee camp. And I saw a lot of things there, and read a lot of things from there, and I was like, that is so abstract, that there can be a refugee camp in one of the richest countries in the world, and there can be people there. There was a little boy who was into it, and he at some point showed his leg was totally destroyed and had like infections and everything, and he later...
graphic.
Yeah, really graphic, and he kind of explained that he was kidnapped in Syria and was driven over by a car by the kidnappers several times, and what hit me so strong was actually his response to the question, how do you feel about that? And he was kind of like, what can you do? This is life. And then turned around and go into the muddy refugee camp, and I was like, how the fuck can this 8-year-old little boy just shake that off? So it's kind of like, I need to find out how that can be a refugee camp, but I also need to know how can these people just live in this and be strong in this. So that became the only like destination I had on my travel. I need to see this, and there was no plan about how I would see it or anything. I just wanted to go there and see, and then maybe travel further on.
Yeah. So you were like basically hitchhiking and everything like towards that direction.
Yeah. For the first week or two, I was just walking by myself, and then when I got to the German border, I started hitchhiking, and then I did a mix of walking and hitchhiking.
Okay.
Yeah.
But back then it was already kind of the goal, not the goal, but the destination. It was Calais.
Yes, so I got through Germany, got through Holland, Belgium, towards Calais, in that sense.
Would you like to share a story about the travel there?
Well, I can share one story, for sure, because that was actually a very important story. I do a lot of talks in Denmark about this, and this story I always tell because I think it's very important. And it was about a man I met in a city in Belgium called Ghent, a very beautiful city. But there's also a lot of tourists, so I was like, I need a place where there's no people when I came there, because when you travel as a hitchhiker alone, the funny thing about it is you're always together with other people because you rely on other people. So you're never alone. And I just needed to be alone. And I found this like small gallery. It was absolutely empty. So I walk in there and I sit down. Got to talk with the gallerist. And at some point a man walks in as well. And he overhear my story and overhear how I was traveling around. And he kind of says like, you know what, I've been traveling around the whole world as well. You can sleep at my house. And I thought, great, right? I got to talk. But this was a very important meeting because this man, he was not only one man, he was several men or persons. And that sounds a bit funny, right?
It does.
But he was like a bodybuilder type, right? So he was a former bodybuilder. He was like my dad's age. So he was very big, right? And then when he walked through the city, he had like tight jeans on and sailor shoes and a Ralph Lauren white with the, I don't know what this is called, the...
This thingy, yes.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yes.
But it was up, right? So he was sharp. And then he was walking through the city like this. And when he saw a woman he liked, he did like this. Right? So he was a big man, right? The funny thing is, when we returned to his home, I saw that every morning when he wake up, he sat like in this yoga position, meditation, and he was like singing every morning, right? So he was a sexist, but he was also a Buddhist, which is a funny combination. Yeah. But other than that, he was also very angry. He was actually very angry, and he hated the system, and he hated politics. But there was one thing he hated more than everything, and that was Muslims. He was very angry at Muslims, and me and him we were not agreeing on the political subjects of the world, but we were talking a lot, and we were both travelers of the world, so we had a good conversation going on. And after 3 days, something very strange happened, because I was not allowed to sleep upstairs. He had like a house in 3 sections, and I was only allowed downstairs. He said specifically, you are not allowed upstairs. So I didn't go upstairs, right? So I slept on a sofa, like a leather sofa, and everyone who has slept on a leather sofa knows it's very sticky. You're sweaty and sticky when you wake up. So I wake up, and he's not come down yet, so I go to a shower. He's not come down yet, so I make a little bit of food. He's not come down yet, so I eat it. He doesn't come down yet, so I think, okay, I just sit on the sofa back and then start drawing. And then this man comes down. And you know how you sometimes, just by the noise of people's walking, can know how the mood are? Nobody would ever doubt the mood this man was going down with, because he was like stamping down the stairs, and when he come down, he was like and just like being very angry. And I got very scared, because this was a big bodybuilder type, and I was just a skinny hippie, so he could just fold me 3 times and just hoop me out of the window if he wanted to, right? Yeah. And I was just very scared, so I just, at some point, I just said, what's wrong, right? And he just stops, and he's like, I just need to tell you something. And it goes on, and he doesn't tell me anything, and then he's just like, I just yell, then just tell me, right? And he really have to take a deep breath and get himself together, right? And then he says, if you have to stay here longer, you need to know that when I'm here at home, I need to. When I'm back home, I need to wear dresses. I was like, what? It's just this? And I was so happy. And I immediately asked him, can I draw you while you're wearing your dress? And if he was just a bit red, he got like tomato red in his face, right? And it took me a half hour, but in the end he was convinced, and he walked up the stairs and come down again. And now you have to remember, this guy who was walking around, right? Yeah. He come down in the most beautiful purple dress, very tight, right? Fake boobs, eyeliner and mascara and makeup and earrings and nail polish, and he even had a little hat on with I don't remember what's called in English, but something in front. Yeah. And then he sat very calmly in front of me, and I started drawing, right? And the thing that was so beautiful about this was not that he changed his appearance, but actually changed his whole personality. From being very angry and stuff like that, he got very soft and very open. And we actually started talking, like for real, not just about, but we started talking about ourselves. And he started to tell me about his story, and he got vulnerable. And when you get vulnerable, you put away the shields and you start being honest. And when you're honest, you can have a relationship. You know, the Danish word for love, I think, is the most beautiful word, because love in Danish, kærlighed, if you take the K away, it says ærlighed, which means honesty. And if you take a part of honesty away, ærlighed away, it's just say equity, like yes, it's equal, right? So it's a very beautiful word.
It is.
Yeah, and he was honest, and in that honesty we became equals. And he started talking about how in his childhood he got beaten by his dad every day, and his dad and mom got separated, and he got bullied a lot and everything. And like me, he took a lot of masks on. And he was a young man in the 80s, and the 80s, other than disco and punks and yuppies, it was also very famous for the fitness movement, right? And all these bodybuilders, Arnold Schwarzenegger and all these guys. And he got very strong because he could then get respect from the men, the respect he never got from his dad, and he could be seen by women a way he was never seen by his mom, right? And actually, my therapist said something very, very beautiful to me before I started my travels. And she said to me, you know, to survive, people need to get recognized and to seen and heard. And it's like installed in our brain. Because we as babies, our survival is dependent that our parents or our caregivers see us and hear us, because otherwise we cannot survive. Like human infants is like the most pathetic infants of all animals, right? Because it takes us years to be able to survive by ourselves. Like a cow can walk when it gets out, right? We cannot. But other than that, also research now says that like if you're not looked into your eyes, if you're not touched, if you're not kissed by your parents or your caregivers, you can get mentally very wrong, or you can also die. It's very beautiful, but it's also very dark in some way or another, right?
It is how dependent.
Yeah, for sure. But also she says, like, she asked me then, and I can ask you now, what does a child do if it's not getting seen?
It's just annoying. Like, it's just asking for attention all the time.
Yeah, it starts speaking, right? But if it speaks and doesn't get seen or heard, what then?
Starts shouting, I guess.
There's a step before that.
A step cries?
Yes.
Okay.
Start crying, right? And cries and cries and cries. You all know that, right? Start crying. And then the next level is getting angry. If you're not seen and heard when you're crying, like most people are seen or heard when they start crying, but a lot of people are not. And when they are not seen as when they show their vulnerability, right? They start getting angry. And we all been in a classroom with one of these kids who just smash everything up or try to be in the center, because that's the only way now to get seen or heard. And I would say most people, when they start getting angry, get seen or heard. But there's still a small percentage that's not. And what is the next level from that? That is to be a shadow, because you don't believe anymore that it's your right to be seen or heard. You don't believe that anything can see or hear you. And you become a shadow, and you become depressed, you become angstful, you become suicidal. And this is the step where things get like dark, right? And my therapist said something very clever. She said, if you have to go from this step all the way back, you have to take one step down. So when you're this, you have to allow yourself to get angry again. This
does make sense.
Yeah, you have to allow this is a human condition, right? And when you can get angry and you can, like, this fire in the stomach, when you can do that, you can start actually express your feelings, right? Cry and stuff like that. And when you are able to do that, then it's time to start practicing using your mouth, talking, right? Explaining how you feel, explaining the situation, right? When you're able to do that, you can just be yourself. You're not reliable on other people. And this is the steps we have to take. And Rudy also got angry at some point. But he was not 20 or anything, he was 50. And he got a big flip, right? He told me so. And he told me there was like 4 policemen he was just throwing around. I believed him because he was very big, right? But in the end, he kind of figured out that to be vulnerable and go away from the anger, he somehow had to wear dresses. And I don't know if that's was because he kind of wanted to personate the female, the classical traditional female femininity, which in its basic just means openness. and vulnerability. If that was a way for him to just allow himself to be that, I don't know. I never did into like a psychological discussion about it. Just accepted it.
Yeah.
But his problem was that his therapist didn't, and she kind of told him that the world was not ready to see him in dresses, so he was hiding. And I was the first man he ever showed, and the first man he ever told. And he learned me a lot of things. Also about this anger, and because he was very fearful that a lot of the Muslims now coming would not accept him as he is, and maybe rightful so, maybe not. I will not be the judge about that, but that was his fear, and that fear was not singularity or uniquely his. Like all the places I traveled in Europe at that time in 2015, the thing they were most scared about was refugees, immigrants, and Muslims. So this was the fear we had to kind of like, we cannot just put it back as like evil people or whatever. We had to recognize that this is an anger that comes from a fear, and let's go into this fear and see how it is. Like maybe it's rightful so to be a little bit fearful, maybe not. Let's have to talk. And that was very important for me before going to refugee camp, to have that background with me. So for me, that's a very beautiful and very important story of my travels.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
And then maybe we can move on to when you got to Calais, actually. Like, how was it? How was your first impression?
So I remember I met some people in Calais, and they kind of invited me to come to the camp. It was an old couple who were pensioned, so they had time to go. And we were driving in some vans, and we drove a little hill and back again, down the roads, and on the highway bridge. And when we got on the highway bridge, it was just like a crazy sight, like thousands of tents in every color just put up randomly, trash everywhere, mud everywhere, and just people coming by us, some without shoes, some without jackets. So it was literally, it was hitting me hard. I remember driving into this refugee camp, and the mud, I could see, it was in the mornings, I could see the first people getting out, put a little bit of water in the mouth, spitting it out, kids running around, but especially one face I never forget. And it was a man who just held my eye contact while we drove by, and it was just like moving his head while we were driving by. And it was first when I cut the eye contact, I saw which situation he was standing in, because the man himself was standing in the water up to his belly button, and the tents behind, and the tents behind him was just overflown because it's been raining for several days, and the camp itself was not far away from the water, and also it was on sandbanks, so there was no, I don't know, sediment to like grab the water and suck it down. It was just on the stayed. So when it was raining a lot, several places of the camp itself was over flood, and this hit me very hard. And then I didn't get to look at it for long, because the guy driving the car suddenly just speeded it up, and I was like, fuck man, because it was small roads and people were everywhere, so it was a bit dangerous. And it just says, look out the window. I looked out the window, and in the rear mirror I could see like people just running after these cars we were driving with, that was filled with clothes and food, because they knew it, and just hammering on it. So we had to get in a safe place where we could stop, and he stopped the car, and we run outside, opened the car, and I had to stand outside with the other volunteers, because to make sure that nobody was fighting over the food or whatever, so people just standing in a nice line. And this was my first day, so I was kind of like shocked by these sights.
Okay. So you were already surrounded by volunteers when you got there. Was the couple related to an NGO or something?
They were, but I was just lucky to meet them.
Okay.
I was just lucky to meet them. But they were in an organization called Salam in France. And they were kind of like, I don't know if they were the heads of the Calais division, but at least very involved with it. I don't remember so well anymore. But they were driving in the camp every day with food and clothes. Yeah, for sure.
And every day would be the same reaction?
Kinda. Yeah, kinda. Okay. And also depends if they come like with a lot of cars and stuff. And this was not a good way to do it also. It was necessary because there was no organization taking care of the camp. Well, there was a private firm hired by the French state. I don't remember the name of it either, but before it was normally like it could be Secours Catholique, it could be Red Cross.
So there were like a lot of organizations doing something, but none of them were like in charge of everything.
No, and also Red Cross was not allowed into the asylum centers and refugee camps in France. They got fired by the former president Sarkozy.
Okay.
And instead they had this private firm. And this private firm had barricaded themselves behind a wall in the refugee camp. So if you have the refugee camp, it took probably 20 minutes to go from either the ends, and they were at the other end, and there they had a wall, and in that wall there was a port, and this port they opened from, I think, from 12 to 5 or 12 to 7, something like that, for small hours. And in there you could get a ticket, get some clothes, maybe if you're lucky, but then you had to, you didn't get the clothes there, you had to go into Calais 6 kilometers in the right place with the tickets the right day, otherwise you had to go again. And also in there you could get food, but they could only get food 1 time a day. And you had to stand in line outside. And they could only give food to 2,000 people. There were 4,000 people in the camp. That's why they had to drive into the camp. Also in the camp there was no clean water. There was no toilets. So people had to shit everywhere. So there was just shit everywhere. So it was very unsanitary. It was very unhealthy. And it was not a good situation. And that was why people had to drive in and give food. But at some point I was like, this is not a good way to do it. And actually at that point I got a very good friend, English woman, again in her 50s, who had been like a firefighter and been in NGOs and actually lived a very rough life. But she knew a lot about survival and about being in these situations. So I just like jumped on her bandwagon, and she started learning stuff, and we started to do a thing I'm not supposed to recommend when I do my talks or doing interviews, which was that we started to live and sleep in the refugee camp to figure out, for example, nobody knew how many women there were. Nobody knew how many children there were. Nobody knew if it was the right people who got the food and the help every time, or it was just the strong and healthy people who were fastest to stand in the line. So we started to figure out these things, and this woman found out there was a lot of women in need. They had no sanitation, no sanitation for menstruation, no sanitation for the kids, like Pampers and food, and so no toilets. And it was also unsafe for these women to be in the camp because, like, we know this from festivals as well, like a tent is not very safe. And then in a refugee camp where people are in survival mode, it's not safe for women. For several reasons. It could be rape, it could be anything, right? Also found out that a lot of the women away, the smugglers want them to pay is by prostitution. So actually we found outside of Calais, in like old industry buildings, we found a lot of especially Eritrean women who are Christian as prostitutes. So it was not safe. So she wanted to build like a women's center, a women's and children's center, like so for the small children, and started building that and got all the volunteers and started doing things for them.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're running out of time, but you can tell all about it afterwards. Thank you so much for staying with us, and until the next program.